I'll just say it right now. BMS is one of the best rhythm games ever. Period. I've played BMS for a little over 2 years now, and despite playing many different rhythm games over the years, BMS has been and will continue to be my go-to game. Wait, let's take a step back. For those coming from other rhythm games, there's a good chance that you don't know what BMS even is. I'm not gonna just read out the Wikipedia page for you. After all, Losermanwin rated that in his video. However, I will briefly summarize it. Technically, BMS isn't the game itself, but rather the file format in which the charts are made. Everything revolves around the charts, including the game clients, internet rankings, events, etc. The gameplay itself is just a clone of 2DX, with the main mode having 7 keys in a turntable, also known as 7 key plus 1, but also having other key modes such as 5 key plus 1, 14 key plus 2, and even 48 keys. But unlike other rhythm games, the charts themselves don't revolve around the game, but rather the game revolves around the charts, which will become an important point later on. However, let's get into the first reason why I like BMS so much. Reason 1. Freedom. I mean, yeah, many of the community-driven rhythm games are free and have a level of freedom that surpasses the average commercial game. Things like skinning and custom charts are all standard in these types of games. However, BMS takes freedom to its absolute extreme. Remember how I was talking about the game revolves around the charts? Well, that means you even have the freedom down to which BMS player you even choose to play on. Everything is decentralized, so there isn't just one developer that has control of everything. So if, let's say, the developer chooses to make a decision that you don't like or take the game in a direction that you disagree with, you can always choose to do something else. This kind of makes BMS the Linux of rhythm games, which is why I say you have so much freedom in this game, because it's free as in freedom. Reason 2. Community driven. Once again, while many other games call themselves community driven, BMS takes it to a whole nother level. I don't feel like the most qualified person to talk about this because the only thing I've contributed to this community is a few mods and videos, so I'd like to just use this section to thank everybody who's ever contributed anything to BMS. Anyone who's participated in any event, whether that be producing songs, drawing the BGAs, or making the charts. Any developer who's helped work on BMS players, internet rankings, tables. There's so many people who make BMS possible. Even something as small as leaving an impression or voting on tables makes a huge difference. All these people contributing makes it possible for BMS to do something I don't think I've seen any other community-driven rhythm game do, which is have almost all of its content be completely original to itself. All of these songs, BJs, and charts are made for BMS, and sometimes even licensed or taken by other games. Reason 3. Gameplay. Now, just a quick warning, this section will just be mainly personal preferences, but one thing I have to talk about is key sounds. No, not like these key sounds, like real key sounds. I'm talking about where each key actually plays per the music. These are core to what BMS is, and I'm here to argue that rhythm games, without them, just don't feel the same. I don't improve for the sole reason of chasing higher rankings or numbers, although that is part of the reason and you certainly have the freedom to do so. I improve so that I can play harder and harder charts and play charts with more key sounds. It's satisfying watching yourself improve by having more control over the music and being able to not only see how dense the patterns are, but also hear the keys that you are playing. It's such a satisfying progression system that feels so much better than any artificial progression system or ranking system. Besides key sounds, the actual 7 keys and scratch note provide just enough depth to host all kinds of different and silly charts, while also not being too gimmicky in a way that feels unfair. This allows most charts to be sight-readable, with most players even using random to intentionally search up the notes. For me personally, I can't tell you something more annoying in rhythm games where its mechanics force you to grind the same song over and over again for FC. This turns just having fun hitting the keys and listening to music into a Geometry Dash type rage game where your run is over if you mess up even once. So you retry the same songs thousands of times for the empty accomplishment of being able to say that you did it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do that in BMS or choose not to do that in other games, but when you're directly compared with others and how well you can play the same songs over and over again, then it just makes the game not fun. This relates to my next topic, BMS being home to probably the best clearing system ever created, the Easy Gauge. More specifically, L2's Easy Gauge. It's just a perfect blend of being lenient enough to allow you to push your skill ceiling, while also being just strict enough to make it impossible to mash, usually. Unlike other clearing systems, it doesn't fail you out mid-song, which is really infuriating, especially when you're in the middle of a 10-minute song and you're just kicked out because there's a random difficulty spike in the middle that you weren't ready for. It's almost always possible to clutch up and manage to clear all the way from 0% gauge, which sometimes makes clear super hype and just encourages you to play out the whole song. The most popular modern table, Celluvis, rates all of its charts based on the Easy Gauge, which just attests to how popular Gauge is. Now, like I said earlier, most of this is personal preference. BMS supports the way I like to play rhythm games, which is pushing my skill ceiling and going for high difficulty clears. However, that doesn't mean BMS also supports the playstyle where you just focus on accuracy and try go for the FCs. There's definitely something for all types of players. So like I said at the beginning, I've played all sorts of rhythm games and probably have seen everything this genre has to offer. BMS is truly something unique, and if you can, I heavily encourage you to give it a try. Almost everything in BMS was made for BMS, and you may even recognize some of the songs from other games. If you want to get started, I have a guide on this very channel, and I'll also leave a link to another guide that I recommend going over if you want to get started. Also, I know I was making fun of it earlier, but if you haven't already, go watch Losermanwin's video on BMS. He explains what BMS is very well, and even goes over some stuff like what tables are. Anyways, thanks for watching, go play BMS.